Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Reading from Canto 3, Chapter 28, text number 13. Prashana Vadanam Bojam Padma Garba Runekshanam Nilotpala Dala Shamam Shankha Chakra Gadadaram Prasana Vadanam Bojam Padma Gaba Runekshanam Nilot Paladala Shamam Shankya Chakra Gadadaram Prasana Vadanam Bojam Padma Gaba Runekshanam Nilot Paladala Shamam Shankha Chakra Gadadaram Prasana Vadanam Bojam Padma Garbha Runekshanam Nilot Paladala Shamam Shankha Chakra Gadadaram Prasana Vadanam Bojam Padma Garbha Runekshanam Nilot Paladala Shamam Shankha Chakra Gadadaram Prasana cheerful, Vadana countenance, Ambojam lotus-like, Padmagarbha the interior of a lotus, Aruna ruddy, Ikshanam, with eyes. Nila Utpala, blue lotus. Dala, petals. Shyamam, Swathi. Shankha, conch. Chakra, discus. Gada, club. Dharam, bearing. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has a cheerful, lotus-like countenance with ruddy eyes like the interior of a lotus, and a swarthy body like the petals of a blue lotus. He bears a conch, discus, and mace in 3 of his hands. Purport. It is definitely recommended herein that one concentrate his mind upon the form of Vishnu. There are 12 different forms of Vishnu which are described in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. One cannot concentrate his mind on anything void or impersonal. The mind should be fixed on the personal form of the Lord, whose attitude is cheerful, as described in this verse. Bhagavad Gita states that meditation on the impersonal or void features is very troublesome to the meditator. Those who are attached to the impersonal or void features of meditation have to undergo a difficult process because we are not accustomed to concentrating our minds upon anything impersonal. Actually, such concentration is not even possible. Bhagavad Gita also confirms that one should concentrate his mind on the personality of Godhead. The colour of the personality of Godhead, Krishna, is described here as Nilot Paladala, meaning that it is like that of a lotus flower with petals tinted blue and white. People always ask why Krishna is blue. The colour of the Lord has not been imagined by any artist. It is described in authoritative scripture. In the Brahma Samhita also, the colour of Krishna's body is compared to that of a bluish cloud. The colour of the Lord is not poetical imagination. There are authoritative descriptions in the Brahma Samhita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and many of the Puranas of the Lord's body, his weapons and all other paraphernalia. The Lord's appearance is described here as Padma Garbha Runakshanam. His eyes resemble the inside of a lotus flower, and in his 4 hands he holds the 4 symbols, conch shell, discus, mace, and lotus. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Of my spiritual essences and my spiritual master, has kindly opened my eyes and taught light of knowledge. So here Srila Prabhupada is referring to a number of scriptures. The first is being the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. He talks about the 12 different forms of Vishnu. So I just had a look up what that was. And he explains that the 12 forms of Vishnu are the 12 Vaikuntha forms of Lord Krishna, corresponding to the predominating deities of the 12 months. This is in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which is the chapter of unlimited forms of Krishna. Beginning with the month of Margashira, which is late November and December. And that month is known as the month of Keshava. And then December, January, February, March, going on like that. These are the 12 forms, starting with Keshava, November, early December. Then Narayan, Madhava, Govinda, Vishnu, Sri Madhusudana, Trivikram, Vamana, Sridhar, Rishikesh, Padmanabha, and then the month of October, November is Damodar. So this, Prabhupada said, is not the same as the Damodar, which is the name of Krishna given by Mother Yashoda, which is interesting. That pastime actually happens in the month of Damodar, but it's a different manifestation of the Lord. And it's also, Prabhupada corresponds them to the marking of the 12 places on the body that the Vaishnav does with the tilak, starting with Keshava, Om Keshava Namaha. So that's related to that month. So Prabhupada, I couldn't stop reading like you can't. And so it goes on to talk about the different planets, spiritual sky. So all the planets are dominated by the Narayan feature, which is eternal, which they're all eternal, those planets. And then the topmost planet is in the spiritual sky is Krishna Loka, as Srila Prabhupada clarified very definitely to us, which is divided into three portions, Gokul, Mathura and Dwarka. And in the Mathura portion, the form of Keshava is always worshipped or situated there. Also, in the earthly planet, in Mathura, India, Keshava Murti is always worshipped, and then the other forms are worshipped in different areas, like the Purushottam form in Jagannath Puri, in Anandavanya is the Vishnu form, in Mayapur, which is the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is the form of Hari, and then Prabhupada explains that there are other forms situated in various places on the earth, and that this earth, which is divided into 7 islands or continents, on every island there are similar forms of the Lord, but at present they are only found in India. And then Prabhupada, this is Prabhupada. From Vedic literatures we can understand that they exist on all 7 islands, but at present no information about their location. So somewhere in Australasia there is a form of Vishnu. At present we don't know where he is. That's according to Srila Prabhupada. Well, of course he's here in, Riverhead, but this is Krishna's personal form. Oh, and there's something else I thought I'd read as well that that is in the same chapter, because Prabhupada finishes the verse describing the form of Vishnu with holding the 4 symbols, conch shell, discus, mace and lotus. And it's explained in the Nectar of Devotion that when you're taking darshan of the Lord, you start on the left hand, on the right hand side of the Lord, and you look up from his feet and you go round and then come back down. And in the same...
Sorry, is this right or our right?
Well, I can just tell you here,
is
because
right or left?
it's his right. I'm pretty sure it's his right, because that's what I've... Yeah, his right, Krishna's right. Yeah. Krishna's right. So we look at Krishna's right, because it's said here that when describing, this is not taking darshan, because this is the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, but in the Nectar of Devotion it talks about taking darshan like that. But it says here, when describing the positions of objects in the hands of the Vishnu Murtis, one should begin with the lower right hand. I'm assuming that's Krishna's lower right hand. Yes. And then move to the upper right hand, to the upper left hand, and finally to the lower left hand. In this way, Vasudeva is represented by the club, conch shell, disc and lotus flower. And then it just goes on to say, I just have to read a little bit of this. In the spiritual sky, the representations of Narayan are 20 in number and are described as follows. Sri Keshava, lotus, conch shell, disc and club. Narayan, conch, lotus, club and disc. Sri Madhava, club, disc, conch and lotus. Sri Govinda, disc, club, lotus and conch. Vishnu, Murti, club, lotus, conch and disc. But anyway, all the different 12 forms of Vishnu, and then Prabhupada just tells in which hands are holding which ones. So I thought I might get the kids to memorise them and then give them a little test. So here, obviously, that one of the most nectarian things here is Prabhupada talking about Krishna's cheerful attitude, and you automatically think about different. I was thinking about different devotees who are naturally joyful. And then the pastimes between the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that they're just so cheerful. And then all the way to Krishna and Braj and his pastimes in Vrindavan, and how he plays in the forest, and how he teases the gopis, and it's very light and cheerful. And thinking of Dinabandhu Prabhu in Vrindavan and how he tells the different pastimes of the Lord, his cheeky pastimes, and how cheerful he is. And he must have been doing this for many, many years, taking many parikramas around Vrindavan, and it's just a very cheerful presentation. And also other personalities like Indradumna Swami has a very cheerful nature. All of Prabhupada's disciples and followers have a nature that is almost, you could say, is inherited by their absorption in Krishna and his pastime. And And also with the Pandavas, it is interesting how Krishna, in his pastimes, when he grows up, so to speak, and goes to Dwarka, but he doesn't, unlike when he comes as Lord Ram, he doesn't he doesn't perform pastimes as the emperor, or even we don't really hear much about him being a king. But he gives that status to Yudhisthira in his pastimes then, and you can feel Krishna's mood when you're reading, even in the Srimad Bhagavatam, his mood of detachment from management, so to speak, or being himself as the Lord. He's acting as the well-wisher of the Pandavas. He appears when they're at different times in the forest. He appears with Balaram, and when they're there and talks to them, and he goes to the Swayambara of Draupadi and notices the Pandavas in the audience, but he himself doesn't actually try for Draupadi, knowing that she's going to marry Arjuna and the Pandavas. So Krishna's mood is quite a renounced attitude in these different pastimes, and you can sense also that also gives him this natural, joyful personality. Often you hear about management and how the political wranglings that go on between people who have to manage, it doesn't actually result in very cheerful mentalities. And so you can understand why Krishna selected that role, because his personality is very joyful. And even when he's in Dwarka, in that charming pastime of how he is lamenting about the separation from Vraj, and the residents of Dwarka create a Vrindavan inside Dwarka, and they trick Krishna into thinking that he's back in Vrindavan, and even though he's actually Dwarkanath, he's running to Krishna, running to Mother Yasoda, running into the forest, and it's just his attitude is just really joyful and cheerful. And so compared, like Lord Ramachandra, we are a little bit distracted by his beauty and brilliance as a leader, in a sense that it covers over a little bit that the Ramayana is actually a little bit like a tragedy, isn't it? That it ends, that Sita is, that it's like a kind of like tragedy after tragedy. That Lord Ramachandra is, he's exiled to the forest, and then Sita is stolen, and then there's a big war, and then then Sita is again banished to the forest, and then on top of that, at the end of that pastime, she just falls into the earth. And it's a very deep, obviously it's an extremely deep epic, and it's full of instructions for human society, and it's the reason why it's maintained fame on the planet. There's a benediction, or not a benediction, but a quality, a principle of Lord Ramachandra, that he will remain famous after millions and millions of years, because it's 1.7 million years, however many it is, since Ramachandra was here, and still he's famous on the planet. He's more famous in Auckland than Krishna. Krishna was only here 5,000 years ago. So so there's so many instructions there, and it's brilliant, but you wouldn't exactly call it cheerful compared to the Braj pastimes of Krishna and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Rupa Goswami, when he was writing his plays, and when you study them, it's written that Vaishnav theatre always has to end happily. There's actually no such thing as tragedy in Vaishnav theatre. The audience have to leave in a cheerful mood, And so we can understand that's a very practical principle in the Kali Yuga because there's just so much misery. And so this is the mercy of the Lord. It's the mercy of Him that He appeared just before Kali Yuga in such a brilliant and bright attitude. And so the other point that's made here by Srila Prabhupada is Krishna's colour. And it's explained here that Krishna is described as Nilok Paladala, meaning that it is like that of a lotus flower with petals tinted blue and white. Sometimes we hear that he's blackish blue, and here it's explained that it's like the tint of bluish white or whitish blue. So people, and here Prabhupada says, people always ask why Krishna is blue, so I have read some conversations that Srila Prabhupada had with people, and I just looked it up. And one lady was asking, why is Krishna blue? And Srila Prabhupada was saying, first of all, you answer my question, why is the sky blue? And she couldn't answer the question, why is the sky blue? She said, well, I don't know, it's just blue because it's blue. And then he said, that's exactly why Krishna's blue. He's blue because he's blue. And I've heard another time say that he said, when you go back to Vaikuntha or back to Goloka Vrindavan, you can ask Krishna why he's blue. So, other points, but while I was just finding that conversation, I also found really interesting, which I always wondered, because from our little perspective as human beings on earth, we look out and we see the sky and we see that it's blue, and then we hear about Krishna and we might naturally think, well, you wonder if the sky's blue because somehow or other it's connected to Krishna's skin colour, like we're actually seeing Krishna's skin, like, you know, as a universe. I don't know. You always just think that. But, and I think I heard one class someone mentioned it, and the person giving the class, I think, sort of said, well, you have to find a scriptural reference for that. But I actually found this, that Prabhupada's talking about the Brahma Jyoti, and that the illumination of the Brahma Jyoti is reflected in the material world, and it's a bluish reflection. So he says the bluish reflection in the sky is actually a reflection of the Brahma Jyoti, and the Brahma Jyoti is bluish because it is coming out from the blue body of Krishna. So that's from Bombay, October the 12th, 1973. Prabhupada's talking like that. So that's why the sky is blue. And in Montreal in July the 4th, 1968, Krishna's colour, this is Prabhupada saying, Krishna's colour is the sky. When you see the clear sky, the bluish sky, are you not happy? Oh, today is a very nice day. The blue sky, that is Krishna's colour. Brahma Jyoti outside the material, then he goes on to explain that the Brahma Jyoti is actually outside the material sky, but it is being reflected into the material realm, and that's what we see. So we're actually seeing a reflection of Krishna's skin colour. So it's quite amazing that we're actually looking at a reflection of Krishna's skin. And that's actually, that's as far as I was going to go here. Although there is a very interesting aspect to the reflections in the universe, which I like to share because it's quite amazing. But in relation to the temple of the Vedic planetarium, there was, when Prabhupada wanted the devotees to find out about how the universe actually is for the Vedic planetarium, he got a few of his disciples to travel around India and investigate research about the universe from different scriptures and from different pundits who were members of a parampara that related back to astronomers who had studied and written about the universe. And so one from the 19th century, I think, from the end of the 1800s, there was one guru who had disciples. So he felt that his disciples actually weren't qualified to learn about astronomy or Srimad Bhagavatam or anything. So he just read to them from the Mahabharata. And he explained to them about the Mahabharata, and he talked about how when when Dhritarashtra was first asking Sanjay what was going on, the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita chapter, when he was asking at the beginning, what's going on on the battle, and where did all the armies come from? Which parts of the world did they come from? That was one question that he asked Sanjay. And so Sanjay explained that there was this army coming from that continent, and this army coming from this island, and this army coming from that part of Europe, or whatever it was. And so then Dhritarashtra asked him, so how do you know where all of these armies come from, and how do you know about the shapes of these continents? And so Sanjay explains that when you look at the moon, you see a reflection of the continents on the earth. So he explained to Dhritarashtra that on one side of the planet, when you look at the moon, you see 2 peepal leaves. So we have a peepal tree up there by the old temple. You can see the leaves, they go like that. And he said 2 peepal leaves on top of each other like that. And if you are on the other side, you see a rabbit, right? You see a rabbit. And that is actually a reflection of the continents. So when I was reading that, it was actually in Damodar, in Karatak one year, and it was a full moon that day. And so I went to look out at the moon, and then I got a map. I looked at the map, and so I looked at it, and I saw that if you turn the map around this way, so it's facing the other way, then you see the rabbit on the moon. So it's a reflection, so it's actually going the other way compared to it has to be upside down, right? So, so then you also, I was then looking it up on Google, and the Americans say, why do the Chinese people say that there's a rabbit on the moon? It's a man on the moon, but because the man is the head and the body, that's what they see. They see the man on the moon. But in China they see a rabbit on the moon, so it's a reflection of the planet. So this is just reinforced. I just thought I'd bring that up about the reflections that we do actually see. We can actually see tangible reflections of spiritual truth, and in many ways, in many ways, but it's exciting. Yeah. So is there any questions or comments or corrections?
It's just so nice to know that what we've been given is so authoritative,
Mm-hmm.
and so we can take it and we try and meditate on it. Like we're going to be hearing of this beautiful form of the Lord, and then we're going to hear of His smile and His laughter, and
Yeah.
it's just like you say, it's actually a very nice light meditation. It's not too, although it's not Krishna or Radha, but it's still very sweet. So we're so lucky that we're given all this information. We don't have to speculate. We just got to follow what we're hearing, and by applying this hearing process and trying to meditate on the Lord with His conch and His disc and His lotus flower, then that's the perfection. So it's very sweet.
Yeah, it is sweet. And the chapter goes on to describe all different aspects of the form. So it's really lovely. Yeah, and just decorating the deity worship. I mean, there's so many aspects to Srila Prabhupada's movement, and the deity worship is specifically for those of us on the bodily concept, because the bodily concept of life is, in a conditioned state, is not joyful. It's not cheerful. But so it just has to be transferred to decorating the deities. And when you go into the deity room, or you have your own deities at home, when you're performing deity worship, it's so joyful. That all the aspects are joyful. You're chanting the holy name. The Sankirtan, the Harinam is just naturally joyful, even if you've got no taste of chanting. If it's austere to go and chant. It's still, you can't deny the fact that the Sankirtan party is a joyful activity, and going to the holy dhams, it's just, we were just having a conversation at home about all our different favourite places, our most atmospherically favourite places in India, And there's just so many very sweet, warm, joyful places, like, at different times of the day in different temples. It's just really worth, we all have to go over and because there's devotees who have been serving there for generations and or just even like daily, and they're just there to glorify Krishna. So it's just such a joyful atmosphere there, in here as well. Yeah, associating with the devotees, Prabhupada said that laughter is a Vaishnav activity.
Just a little comment on Krishna's blue color. Part of the philosophy is a philosophy called coherentism, which basically says that if all of your authoritative source, like for us the Shastra, or almost all of it, is coherent, in other words, it proves itself to you ethically, and like the rabbit on the moon thing, all these things are coherent. And you have a large body of knowledge, which is all coherent, it all works together, it all proves itself and follows on systematically. Then you can assume that things like Krishna is blue is also true because of the coherentism of all the rest of the philosophy.
Yeah.
That's a academic part, accepted part of philosophical.
Yes, and I'm sure somewhere it must be in Vedic processes as well,
Yeah, I don't know what the Sanskrit word is for coherentism, but I think that's
coherentism, yeah.
of Sanskrit philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, or even Prabhupada just in that purport that where in Bhagavad Gita where it says that blind following is condemned, and that we're meant to actually analyse and, it's meant to all make sense to our reasoning, isn't it? Is that what kind of what you're saying? Yeah.
Maybe Prabhupada has a Sanskrit word.
I just wanted to, I heard in one of the pravachan, it's been said that Ram's life is harder and Krishna's life is more blissful, but actually it's the opposite. Okay, if you see the life of Krishna from day one to day, and there is more problems than actually what we see in Ramji's life. We've only seen Ramji's life for 14 years of very hard thing, but whereas Krishna's, but the blissful of Krishna, he made all the whole life very cheerful with his leelas and everything.
Yeah.
So when we normally think that Ram, this life was very hard.
Yeah.
But actually the hardest life was.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Prabhupada was just talking about how Krishna's life from the beginning to the end, he was attacked by all the demons,
He lost all the kingdom at the end, but whereas Ramji had it.
Yeah, right, that's right. Yeah, he lost all the...
He had a very beautiful 14 years of very nice feeling at home, playing with the parents and stuff.
Yeah, and even in the forest, they actually had a lovely time there. And even I can even understand it. It's just when you're saying that, I was thinking that it reminds me of when you go to India, and you see all these really poor, cheerful people, and then you land in New Zealand and you're on the motorway and you just see all these big cars go past, and you look in their faces and they're anything but cheerful. Anything. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, that's just a bit mundane, but yes, but that's very interesting because Krishna is always cheerful, despite being, faced with all of those things.
I've got a question. In Krishna's childhood pastimes, he gets attacked by one of the demons, and I thought that Krishna's energy, it can't be associated with any materialistic activity.
I was just thinking that. I was thinking that exact point. Yeah. So carry on.
So I don't really understand that. Is it in his form as a child that he can associate with material things as well?
Yeah, the thing is that Krishna's energy is distinctly different to the material energy. Yeah, it's not. The material energy is a reflection of Krishna's pastimes. So everything here is not real in the sense that it's all temporary and it's all acting out, pretending to be the Lord, so to speak, because this world is created because the living entities want to imitate Krishna. So therefore it's the same, it looks the same as Krishna, but Krishna's energy and Krishna's pastimes is the original actual thing. But everything that goes on in this material world is existing in the spiritual world, but it's of a totally different energy, because this is all an imitation, so to speak. It's like an imitation, like you have a Gucci, you get these Gucci bags or Gucci wallets. You can get these ones on the street in India, they've got Gucci, but it's totally an imitation. That's exactly what this world is like, an imitation Gucci wallet. Yeah, it's just, so, and then, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about how, Prabhupada gives quite a lot of analogies of how Krishna's actual mood to this material world as well is very detached. And we're meant to understand Krishna's detachment, because that helps us to become detached from this world. Yeah. So it's very important to remember, even when we give analogies, that's, when your mind flicks off, but that when Prabhu is talking about Krishna's pastimes, they're very, in essence and in constitution, they're totally different energy. Like earth, water, fire, air and ether, that is matter. And then in the 7th chapter, then Krishna says, over and above that, there's a different energy, which is my spiritual energy, which is the living entities, and that is eternal. And then this earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego is temporary. Yeah. So thank you very much for bringing that point up, because that's actually, Prabhupada says that worshipping the Bhagavad Gita is a real use of your intelligence. So we have to understand those principles, the distinction between the energies, in order to actually discuss even Krishna's pastimes. So thank you. Yeah. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Grace Parthasarati,